Welcome, 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 everyone, to Politics as Usual at usualpolitics.com. Welcome to this webinar on job burnout. So I come to you today to give you just some information on job burnout. If you find any of the information useful or you want to know more, then I also have a full training on udemy.com. So with that being said, let's get started. So I want to start with the boring stuff first, right? Origins of burnout, all right? And we'll keep that part short. Burnout was really discovered by two psychologists, one named Herbert Freudenberger and the other Christina Melask. They're the pioneers of job burnout. And what they saw was their staff, they worked in a psychiatric hospital setting. There was low morale, and they were exhibiting certain symptoms. Those symptoms included insomnia, increased illness, and I'm sorry, let me let somebody in. Okay, so those symptoms included insomnia, increased illness, increased loss of appetite, fatigue, and mood swings. So they saw this in their staff, and they noticed the low morale. And as they studied it, it looked a lot like depression. All right, it looked a lot like depression. If you think about depression symptoms, you're thinking about the insomnia, right, or sleep disruption. You're thinking about the increased or decreased appetite, right? But increased illness sometimes. There's pain associated with, like chest pains, headaches, things of that nature associated with depression. And burnout has all the same symptoms. There were only two differences. And this is the part you have to remember. Burnout is always job related, and burnout affects job performance. So when we're talking about job burnout, right? Let's say Susie goes to work. Susie has a job, working with youth in a group home, right? Susie's at work. She has an issue with one of the kids. The kid cuffs her out every day that she goes there. She doesn't like her supervisor. She's home. She's frustrated. It's affecting her sleep. She's only getting 5 hours of solid sleep, but not really REM sleep at night. So she's fatigued all the time. She starts having chest pain. It's affecting her health. That's job burnout. But let's say Susie's kid, right? Her child is what she's thinking about. His grades are done. He's hanging with poor role models or other youth around the neighborhood who are delinquents or who are getting in trouble. And Susie's worried about her son. She's worried about her son's future. She's worried about his grades. She's worried about him getting in trouble in the community with the kids that he's hanging with. That affects her sleep. She doesn't sleep at night. She has chest pain. She has headaches. She's depressed, right? Mood swings. It's not job burnout. It's depression, right? Looks more like depression. So when we're looking at job burnout, just remember that it has to be related to the job, right? And it also would affect job performance, right? Susie goes to work. Susie shies away from the kid that cussed her out. That affected her job performance, right? Susie doesn't deal with the kid that cussed her out, right? Susie goes to work and takes longer breaks. It affects her job performance. So the thing to remember about job burnout is it's a lot like depression, except for it's job related. So what I want to do is let's just look at, when you look at why it's important to understand job burnout, because we're talking about job burnout, we're talking about work stress, we're talking about self-care. You need to understand what it is that burnout is and where it's coming from. So first, though, when you're looking at burnout, let's look at how it affects the job, right? It affects the quality of service. If you like doing your job well, or if you take pride in doing your job well, how you do your job can be affected. It can be affected. It causes stress, right? Physical and emotional stress, right? And it causes companies money. Because when employees are inefficient, it causes an issue. And I'm not going to jump too deep into this, but some jobs are burnout jobs, as well as some people who run certain jobs, who are the supervisors or the managers, have a whole culture of burnout, a whole environment of burnout, high stress environment, right? Sometimes that's set by the leaders on the job. So let me go through these symptoms of burnout, right? I'm going to go through the physical symptoms first, and then we'll go into the emotional symptoms. So sleep deprivation and insomnia. I just want to make a distinction between the two. Sleep deprivation is when you're just not getting enough sleep, right? You might sleep 3 hours at night because you're tossing and turning, you keep waking up, right? You might sleep 5 hours the next night, but you normally 8 hours. Keep in mind, everybody's threshold is different. Some people are good off of 6 hours of sleep. Other people need a full 8, or they don't feel right. They feel fatigued throughout the day. So it depends on the person what that's going to look like for you and how it's going to affect you. But sleep deprivation, you're simply not getting enough. Insomnia, you're not sleeping, right, at all. It's a lack of sleep. So sleep deprivation can include sleep disruption, where you sleep 2 hours and then wake up. You sleep another hour, then you wake up. You keep waking up, you're looking at the clock, and it's only been an hour, but it felt like it's been 5. Then you wake up in the morning and you have no energy. Fatigue, right? That tiredness, especially throughout the day. You wake up. You're ever waking up and it's 7 a.m. in the morning and you're going to work and you're fatigued. You're tired already. It's like, whoa, I should be fresh right now, right? But you're not, because you're tired from the burnout, from not sleeping last night. Loss of appetite, increased illness, chest pain, shortness of breath, social isolation. Social isolation is something that, regardless of what is going on in your life, that always makes it worse. Whenever you have social isolation, it'll compound any issue, whether it's job burnout, whether it's bipolar, whether it's depression, it doesn't matter what it is, it compounds it. So you have to be careful when you're in these situations where you don't feel like being around people, that you're around constructive people. Because also being around the wrong people can compound the situation as well. Emotional symptoms. Let's just talk about that real quick. So, depersonalization. Depersonalization is where you start to look at people and you take away all the human qualities. So, Susie's at work. She's working with these kids, and she no longer sees them as human beings. So everything becomes authoritarian. Everything becomes yelling. It becomes borderline abusive. She doesn't listen to requests. She doesn't listen to reason, because at that point, Susan's so frustrated. Susan is so burnt out. She's not sleeping, and she's so frustrated with the job that she's just trying she's just trying to hold on to her own personal sanity. So depersonalization, you take that away. You take that whole human aspect away from the individual. Emotional exhaustion. So we have physical exhaustion and emotional exhaustion, and oftentimes they do go hand in hand. It's when you're emotionally spent. You can't do anything else emotional in the moment. You can't listen to anybody's emotions, right? Susie and her working with the kids. Kid is telling her, trying to tell her that he had a tough day, and Susie just can't hear it right now because Susie's done. She's over it. It makes you change your feelings about the client, right? So you start out working a job and then you burn out. And now, listen, those kids that you were working with, that you were trying to save the world in the beginning, now you just don't see them the same. Now you're ready to give up on them. Now you're not going the extra mile for them. Reduce personal accomplishment, anxiety, cynicism, detachment. And here's the other thing. Burnout, job burnout can lead to depression. It can lead to depression. So we need to keep that in mind. It has the symptoms already, but it can lead to depression if we don't get it taken care of. So we're talking about some of the causes of burnout, right? And this is the part that's so important. If you don't get anything else out of this webinar, take this part with you. Burnout can occur in 3 domains, right? Work-related. Now, the work-related domain is burnout that occurs due to the job conditions and the overall job itself, okay? So to give you an example, we can go back to Susie, and I'll give you a second example, all right? Susie's working at this job. This is not about the kids, by the way. We talked about the kids, Susie and the kids, but this that she worked with, but this is about the actual job itself. Susie hates the paperwork. The supervisor is overbearing, right? That's job related. Those things bother her along with the client, right? Client related, those kids. They occur from interactions with consumers. Those kids, the kid that cusses her out every day, that's client related burnout, right? You need to know where this is coming from. So let me go back. I got to take a step back because I said I would give you a second example for work related burnout, right? Let's say you work in a hotel and you're dealing with, it's a very expensive hotel. You're constantly dealing with high-end clients with heavy demands who are very snippy, who oftentimes talk down to you and offend you, right? But let's say that you have a supervisor that's the same way. And you feel like your relationship with the supervisor is terrible, right? And maybe even you hate that you have to go and cater to the clients that are rude to you, right? Maybe you hate that part of the job. That's work related, right? So Johnny's working in front, a client comes in, it's very rude, the client, and then Johnny still has to go and help this client up to their room and be nice to the client, and Johnny feels offended, right? That's work related burnout. And as well as also client related, because the things that the clients say to them is also very offensive, right? So that becomes client-related burnout. And then there's personal, right? How we experience the burnout. So even within the work-related burnout, the client-related burnout, how we experience the burnout is individual based on individual factors. People have different thresholds for different things. Somebody says something to them offensive and they shake it off. Other people, they're upset for a week, right? It just depends on that individual. So when we're looking at personal burnout, we're talking about how you experience it, right? How you experience the burnout. Some people experience the burnout through headaches, chest aches. Other people have sleep disruption, sleep deprivation. Then there's a third person that goes through the same job and experiences nothing, right? They go home and they're good. So it's about how you experience the burnout. Some people experience it at home. Some people are good or feel terrible at work, but when they go home, they're fine. So it just depends. It depends on a lot of situations. So when we're talking about causes of burnout, I'm not going to go through all of them. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we have a full training on udemy.com. But this is one of the most important causes of burnout that you need to understand. Psychological attachment to work during non-work hours, right? So some people are going to say, what is that? And what that is when you're home and you're still thinking about work, that's a problem. So to keep it simple, when you leave work behind. Don't think about it. Don't try to do anything for it. Now, there are jobs where you do have to do things for it, right? I've been a mobile therapist. I was on call 24 hours a day. And I'm going to tell you, I've gotten some calls. And when I've gotten those calls, I always try to make sure I resolve them on the phone. If I could not resolve them on the phone, then I would go out. But the vast majority of the time, I would say 90% of the time, I was really good at resolving them on the phone, not going out. Okay. So, and the good thing about it is that I was successful at it. There were times when I did have to go out, whether it's a weekend or at night or whatever that was. But just understand that the less work that you do for work when you're home, the better off you're going to be concerning burnout, right? When you're having a problem at work, say a supervisor tells you that your work stinks, say they don't give you clear directions, but then they complain about your work all the time and you feel like they're not giving proper instruction. And you take that home with you. So now you're thinking about it, you're ruminating on it, meaning that you're thinking about it over and over and over and over. Now it affects your sleep. It affects your relationship with your kids or your husband or your significant other. It's a problem. It's burnout. It's burnout. And it can lead to other problems if it continues over time. So I'm going to share my screen with everybody for a second because I want you to see what I'm looking at. Let's see, I'll share the screen. So okay, so feelings of burnout. Look at it when you were looking at this picture. Look at the picture and look at all the words inside of the silhouette. And when we're talking about burnout, people could be feeling any number or combination of these different things, or all of them. I mean, anxiety, worry, right? Fretful, urgency, pressure, hurry, hectic, uncertain. I mean, this picture is perfect for summing up how people feel when they have work stress, when they're suffering from job burnout, right? When they're hurting from some particular situation on the job that's just staying with them when they leave the job. All right, duress, apprehension, intensity. So the idea is that whatever issues we have at work, stay at work. It's like Vegas. Whatever happens at Vegas stays at Vegas, right? Because when you bring it home, there's problems sometimes, right? Depending on what your situation is, there can be problems when you bring it home. If you bring that home from work, then there's problems sometimes. So I just wanted everybody to see that particular thing. And also, because this is the other thing about job burnout is job satisfaction. And the reason why I put this here for job satisfaction is there's one important thing that you need to understand. When you're satisfied with your job, right, meaning that there's high job satisfaction, you see the arrow pointing up for job satisfaction, there's always low burnout. So when you're satisfied, you're good, right? You're not stressed. You're not worried, right? Now, I also want to point out that job burnout can be based on situation at work. You can love your job most of the time, but maybe hate this certain report, and this report is due 4 times a year, right? Quarterly report. You don't like it, but you put up with that because you like everything else. Or maybe there's a project and it's 3 weeks and it's very stressful. So for that 3 weeks, you don't sleep well, you don't eat well, you're tired all the time, and you're stressed, but it's temporary, and you know it's temporary. But when you have that burnout or that work stress long term, it can have some negative effects on your health. So I'm going to stop to share. And so I want to get to, so I'm not really going to go over burnout jobs, but I just be aware that there are burnout jobs out there, jobs that cause higher levels of burnout, including police officers, teachers, especially in like the inner city, working with underserved population, prison staff, things of that nature. So there are jobs that cause more burnout than others. Let me just talk briefly about burnout in the brain. Okay. So I'm not going to get too technical. I just want to talk about fight, flight, or freeze. Now, we know that what fight, flight, or freeze is, when you sense danger, your brain starts to kick out cortisol, which is a hormone that tells you get your body ready for the danger. So if you're walking down the street and you see a pit bull and it's off the chain and it's loose and it's looking at you and it starts licking its chops and it's about to make a run at you, your brain starts kicking out that cortisol from the amygdala, and boom, now your heart's pumping. Now you're ready to either fight the pit bull, you rather either run from it, as in flight, or you freeze up and just don't move, right? So personally, I'm probably out. I'm gonna jump on somebody's car or something. I'm not fast as I used to be, but people. There's a couple different ways, things that people do. It's one of those 3 though, is how you react to danger. If it's a bear in the woods, same thing. Bang, your brain starts to kick out that cortisol. It's fight, flight, or freeze. And that's how we respond to danger. It's a natural thing. It happens in a split second. So when our brains are kicking out cortisol and there's no danger, then it becomes a danger to us. And that's what happens when people have burnout that's severe and chronic. Then you can have an issue called hypercortisolism, which basically is when your brain's spitting out more cortisol than it's supposed to. Because you're really only supposed to be spitting out cortisol from the amygdala to tell your body that there's danger in those situations, right? But if those situations aren't happening, but you're interpreting it that way, right? And people see this in a traumatized brain and trauma. In a traumatized brain, you see people who go into fight, flight, or freeze when there's no danger. When there's no danger, right? So what can happen is you can end up with a lot of low-grade inflammation, which causes issues in the body. It can mess with your working memory, your problem-solving ability, and it just disrupts your creativity. It's very similar to trauma patients. So I just wanted to bring you a little bit of that information. And now I really want to get into a few cognitions, and then I want to give you some things you can do for job burnout. And then we're going to go to questions, okay? Any questions that people have. So when we're talking about cognitions, there's just certain types of mind states that don't lend itself to having a healthy job attitude or healthy job stress, as opposed to an unhealthy job stress. Because stress is a natural thing. We're all going to feel stress at some time, but there's different levels of stress. And when we're looking at cognitions, we have to balance our expectations with the reality of the situation, as well as our perception. So I'll give you one example. So let's say Jimmy expects to be promoted to when his supervisor leaves for another position in 2 weeks. So Jimmy's coworker Keisha was promoted instead of Jimmy. So now Jimmy feels cheated. He's been at work at the company longer and believes he has a better work ethic than Keisha. Management told Jimmy, though, that Keisha was promoted because she had a master's degree and more experience, even though she wasn't there longer. So I guess the question is, some people are thinking, wow, well, does Jimmy have better work ethic? And the answer is, I don't know. Because the reality is you're looking at people's subjective perceptions of you and the job. However, Jimmy's going to start to feel burnt out if he can't control his cognitions about the situation, right? If Jimmy still feels slighted based on the fact that this person had more experience and a master's degree and got the position over him, he's going to be so angry and frustrated at the job, and it's going to affect his job performance, right? And he may even take it home. However, if Jimmy can control his emotions and say, she does have a higher degree than I do, and she does have more experience. So maybe Jimmy sets his sights and says, hey, this is something I can still do, whether here or somewhere else. Because I will have, maybe she has 10 years experience and he has 5. I will have 10 years experience at some point. I will apply for other jobs somewhere else. But whatever that looks like, he has to put this into a thought pattern that's constructive, not one that's destructive. Like, oh, they don't like me. Not playing the victim stance, right? Not that all or nothing. Like, either I get this supervisor position or my career is over. Because that type of thought will make you miserable, right? Not the catastrophic thinking. If I don't get this position, my life is over. My career is dead. It'll make you miserable. So you have to be able to, even if you're mad initially, say, okay, I didn't get the position. She has a master's, but I know I have the skill to do it. I know another opportunity will come, whether at this company or another company, or I'll get the next one, however that is. Maybe I can learn some things from her to help me get to that level, or my previous supervisor, right? So we need to make sure that we're not causing ourselves any cognitive issues, cognitive dissonance, where we have two thoughts that don't fit, right? Those catastrophic thoughts, those black or white thoughts where it's either or. Most things are not an either or. There's always usually something in the middle. So when we have those issues with catastrophic thinking patterns, they cause us burnout, amongst other things. So just real quick, people have a natural negative bias, meaning that we have a propensity to look at the negative over the positive, meaning that the glass is half empty instead of half full for most people. So we just have to be careful of that, and it takes a lot of work to build through that, including with our job situation. So in the Jimmy situation, he has to find a way to make the glass half full for that situation. Perfectionism is going to be a big time issue for anybody who's trying to avoid burnout in a job situation. oftentimes things don't go your way. And that's just a fact of life. So perfectionism is one of those things where if you're working a tough position, you're working with a tough population, you have a supervisor who is very critical, then you're going to probably, you're going to have a lot of issues because you're expecting yourself to do things perfectly. Now, not only you're beating up on yourself, but now this other person is beating up on you as well. So you need to really, that's something that you have to be able to work through and realize that it's not going to be healthy for a burnout situation. So let's talk about the path to reducing burnout. The most important one, and I said this earlier, psychological detachment during non-work hours. Remember, it simply means when you leave work behind. Now, I know that there's some people that have jobs where you have to work from home sometimes, right? Or maybe you got to leave early and work from home, or you just got to get this thing done. Understood. I get it. But let's try to limit those hours you work from home. Maybe you say, okay, I get home at 5. I'm only going to work till 7, no later than that. And I'm going to take at least an hour for me. An hour for me so I can, de-stress. Right? So use your social supports at home and work. So one of the things that people do at work, as we know, is people they develop friendships at work. They develop relationships oftentimes, right? Relationships are a big part of whether you burn out or not. When you have a good relationship with your supervisor, right? It makes the job better. When you have a poor relationship with your supervisor, it can be hell, right? It can be hell. The people you work with when you have good relationships, sometimes it makes tough work easier, right? It makes it worth coming into work, right? When you have good relationships. Use those supports. Bounce some things off of them. How I can handle this situation to make it better, Susie's situation. She's in a group home. She's working with the kid that cusses her out. Hey, she's cool with Jonathan. Jonathan has a good relationship with this kid. Talk to Jonathan. See if he can help mediate the situation to help with that particular kid. Right? So now Susie's not getting cursed out every day. She's getting cursed out every 4 days, which is an improvement, right? An improvement. So let's seek positive work relationships. That's just important with colleagues. And listen, it doesn't have to be kumbaya, best friends, we're going camping type of stuff. But you just got to have those work relationships where people speak to each other, where there's not malice, where people are friendly to each other, where people can talk to each other. You don't have to be best friends. And so in terms of mindset, try to think of 3 positives for every negative situation. And it's not something that's easy. It's not something that's natural. You're going to have to train your mind to do it. And how do you train your mind? So one of the ways that you train your mind is by you're going to have to sit down and just write it out. Write it out. And you'll probably get better at it. And if you can't do it, ask somebody. If you crash your car, right? You come out of your car and your car is totaled and you're like, damn, I'm not going to take the bus. I'm going to catch a ride. I'm mad. I'm angry. What could have been better in that situation, right? Maybe it's that you're alive, right? Maybe it's that you're alive. Maybe it's that, hey, at least I get insurance money. I have insurance. I get a good amount of insurance money. I don't owe anything on it now. So I have this money in my pocket to start, and go buy a new car, right? Maybe you're blessed like that. Some people crash and their car is underwater, so they end up still owing money because the money that comes back goes toward the balance, right? So maybe the car is worth, maybe they owe $10,000, but it's only worth $8,000. So they still got to pay $2,000 and get another car, right? So we have to look at those things and find those positives. Evaluate and reevaluate your expectations. Expectation is so important. So important, right? If you are coming into a position and you think that in a year or two, you're going to be management, top dog, and you're just getting out of college, it's so unrealistic, right? And because you have those unrealistic thoughts, when it doesn't happen, you're going to be pissed off. So we have to evaluate and reevaluate our expectations, because sometimes you get to a point where you realize that you don't even want that position that you thought you wanted, right? You don't even want it. But you don't realize that unless you're constantly evaluating your expectations. Mindfulness, try mindfulness. And there's different types of mindfulness. People think of mindfulness as sitting down is something mystical and your hands are like this and you're breathing. And listen, mindfulness is paying attention on purpose. That's what it is at its simplest form. You can walk outside and mindfully walk. Just pay attention to your feet hitting the ground as you walk. You can do a body scan and you can scan from your toes up to the top of your head. Or you can just breathe and pay attention to your breath. But mindfulness in and of itself is paying attention on purpose. Some people use the adult coloring books. They have a lot of detail and it makes them focus and they're paying attention. So there's a lot of mindful activities you can do, and it's not mystical. It's not anything that is difficult either. And please do not be a perfectionist when you do mindfulness, because it's not a perfection type thing. It's a practice. So you're practicing to get better each time. So meaningful after work activities makes a difference. Some of us go home to our kids. We do. And when you go home to your kids, the meaningful activities you do is with your kids. And you may be burnt out and tired, and you may not feel like cooking dinner and doing all these things. But in that time, find something for you. Find something for you, even if it's 30 minutes, even if it's 10 minutes, right? I got this massager for the shoulders. Do that for 10 minutes. That's what I do every now and then, is use a massager for my shoulders, right? Whatever that looks like. Some people are single. They can go home, play video games. It's a meaningful activity for them. Some people go get a drink after work, or go hang with friends, or they call somebody and have a good conversation. Whatever that looks like. Maybe you got a show. I don't know. If you're watching Real Housewives. Right? The other thing, and this is back on the relationships, better client work relationships. Sometimes you can't control it. If you're working in a setting where clients are always in and out, then yeah, you may not be able to control that. But if you're in a setting where you're constantly working with the same clients over and over and over and over, building a better relationship with clients will go a long way. And there's multiple ways to do it, including using other staff members who have a good relationship, getting advice from them, as well as just having a direct conversation sometimes, a direct conversation. Sometimes we just have to talk about the elephant in the room. That's it. So, when we're talking about strategies for reducing burnout, we should have some type of burnout plan if we're burnt out. If you're burnt out, then you need to actually incorporate some of the things that I just told you about into some type of plan that you're going to do, because we need action steps. So when we're talking about action steps, you need to have things that you plan on doing, daily. So if your burnout plan is, if you know that you go home and you just ruminate and you think about the bad things over and over and over, then maybe you need to break that up by not going home every night. Maybe you go to the gym. Some people work out, right? Working out is an excellent way. It's an endorphin building activity that de-stresses you. And it fatigues you to help you sleep. If you really look at it, right? So some people use that to de-stress, and that's their therapy. They hit the gym. Right now, and during COVID times, which it is right now, you may not be able to do that. So maybe you walk. Maybe you go for a walk. So we need to have some type of plan, right? And I'm going to give you a couple more tips, and then I'm going to turn it over for questions. I would say try yoga. Yoga combines meditation with exercise, especially stretching. Great for just calming and relaxing. Okay. Nature heals. Going out in nature, there's a lot of studies that show that when you go out in nature, it has a healing effect, a calming effect. So doing things like taking a walk in the park, going and sitting at water, or walking around like a lake or a river, whatever type of waterways that you have, a pond, those things are peaceful, and they'll de-stress you. Right? We just talked about exercise. We talked about mindfulness. But if all else fails, seek professional counsel or coaching. And I do coach, by the way. Just to remind you, I do coach, by the way. Keep in mind that exercise, especially cardio, has been shown to help brain functioning as well. It's been shown to help brain functioning in many research studies, as well as mindfulness. So it's just important to keep that in mind. So now that I've talked for about 35 minutes, I want to just open it up for whatever questions that people have. And I'm going to let me open my chat. So any questions that anybody has, we can kind of go from there. And Actually, so the first question, what should be in a burnout plan? So that's a good question. And I actually have a burnout plan coming to my store soon, that you'll be able to download. But what should be in the burnout plan? You need to identify first where the burnout is. Like, is it client related burnout? Is it work related burnout? And the reason for that is, if it's client related, then it may involve a conversation with a client. It may involve talking to a supervisor or a coworker, about how to kind of work with that client better. Or, it may involve addressing the elephant in the room, but if it's work related, it could be more structural. It could be about the supervisor. It could be about a procedure. So that's a whole different strategy you need to take for work related burnout, because it's not just about going home and it is about going home and de-stressing, right? But if there's things you can do at work to make the situation better, that also helps, right? So if I can get a better relationship with a client or coworker, and that makes my situation better at work, it's going to help me in the long run with burnout. It's going to help me, right? So we need to identify where it's coming from. Is it client related? Is it work related? And how are we experiencing the burnout, right? How are we experiencing the burnout? So the next question, does the employer have a responsibility to help employees cope with burnout? So I believe that employers do have a responsibility to help clients cope with burnout to a degree. And what I mean by that is, and I didn't really get deep into it, but when we're talking about job burnout, there can be a culture of burnout in the jobs. It can be the supervisor is just setting a culture of burnout, right? It could be the management is setting a culture of burnout. So there's things that managers can do to make jobs, better for burnout, and create a better work culture. And it starts with how they react to people, the personal relationships they build with, the staff. That's the beginning of it. It also matters as to the structure of how they do things, how they give breaks, how many breaks you get. If you're talking about how much money is paid, right? We're talking about, because let's look at job satisfaction, right? People are more satisfied when they have good benefits and good pay, right? Now, if you don't have good pay, those relationships actually help, right? I worked jobs where the pay wasn't good, but we had great relationships between the staff, the management, and everybody, and it actually helped. Even if we weren't getting paid very well, it made it bearable to do the job, and we're working with a lot of tough clients. So they do have a responsibility to agree to at least set a culture that's not toxic, if that makes sense, right? We know one thing as well that creates a toxic culture is when you feel like you can't talk to the supervisor, when you feel like you can't air out any complaints. So having more of an open door policy, or at least some type of mechanism for people to communicate issues with you, is important. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So I have another question. What should you do if you have a poor relationship with a coworker, and why you're burned out? Okay, so if you have a poor relationship with a coworker, it just depends what that poor relationship looks like. Is it to the level of HR where, you're being harassed? Is it, but you feel as though, your relationship isn't as good? I think it's very situational, but some of the things that you can do is you can talk to a supervisor, and they can become a mediator. If it is a harassment situation, obviously you go to HR, but you can also, if you feel like it's going to be useful, if you feel like it would be constructive, you could talk directly to that particular coworker, about whatever issue that you're having. Talk about the elephant in the room. Open and honest relationships is really kind of the best policy, but also keep in mind, right? In some situations, everybody's different, but you don't have to have necessarily the best relationship. You just have to have at least a cordial one, right? A cordial relationship to be able to say hi, bye, to be able to get information and give information, right? So I guess you have to make sure that your expectations are realistic. Again, I'm not talking about kumbaya and camping and, all that stuff. So, okay. At what point do you think an employee should seek different employment? That's a good question. So that's an individualized question, right? I would never tell anybody to quit their job, but if you're starting to suffer chronic burnout, it can have some serious effect on your health. And when you get to the point where you're just like fed up and you're at home thinking about it all the time, you're not sleeping, and you're ready to kind of like snap out, or it's really affecting your health, then that's, for me, that's it, right? I'm going, like, if it starts affecting my health, if I'm not sleeping, if I'm thinking about it all the time, then I probably can't be there. But everybody has to make that decision for themselves. And also, you may be in a job that you want to leave, but you just haven't found another job yet. So it may even be a while. But that's something else that you have to consider. So it's difficult for me to really answer that question. I can't give you just one answer. It's situational. It depends on the individual, what their threshold is, and what their goals are as well. Yeah, and so if things don't seem like they're getting better, then one thing that I would always do is just keep my eye on the market just to see what's out there, what jobs are out there. Because when you get to a certain level of job, you're not looking necessarily to go down a level or two. You're looking to get something at that level, and when you're at a certain level, those jobs don't always come around. So you just got to keep your eye on the market and apply to things, and go have conversations with employers and see if there's something there for you. And while you're doing that, make the job that you have the best that it can be. It means expressing your needs, making sure if you don't understand things, making sure that they're giving you clear roles and clear instructions. When roles are clear, it makes a big difference. It makes a huge difference. Can burnout affect your home life? Absolutely. Again, if you're taking stuff home with you, then burnout will affect your home life. And, it can affect the relationship you have with your spouse or significant other, with your kids. It can affect, and when I talked about social isolation as a symptom earlier, when people start to go into social isolation, it causes a lot of issues. So it seems like taking work home is a key factor in managing burnout. Can you reiterate how to leave work behind? Perhaps set boundaries with the employer. Yeah, I think that setting boundaries with the employer is important. Again, there may be times certain jobs require certain things. So there may be times you just have to get something done and you don't have time. But I would try to set a boundary even if you have to work at home. So what I would try to do is if you have to go an hour earlier sometimes, it's better to go an hour earlier or 2 hours earlier than staying an hour or two late, because that cuts into your me time, right? Or your family time, your time to do meaningful activities as well. Finding out before you take a job or when you're with a job, what the requirements are for home. I mean, do you have to, are there going to be things you're going to have to work at from home? Trying to figure that out from the beginning. But you have to try to set those boundaries out and plan them out as best you can each week so that you always have time for yourself. And think outside the box, because you know what? There might be a time when you go, you know what? I've been working 12-hour days all week. I'm trying to finish this project. Maybe Friday you don't work a 12-hour day. Maybe you go, you know what? I'm tired. I'm going to work, a 6-hour day, and then I'm just going to do a couple hours on Saturday. Maybe that's easier for you. But you have to figure out what's best for you, and that's all part of the plan. You should write it down and hold yourself accountable to it. How would you know the difference between burnout and depression? They seem similar. Burnout and depression are very similar. It's interesting because, the only difference, again, is really, are you, ruminating? Are your moods associated with work? Is it associated with work? If it's associated with work, then it's burnout. If it's associated with anything else, then it's depression. How can I get a burnout plan? So that's a good question. I actually have burnout plans. So I have a training on udemy.com. You go to udemy.com and you search for me, my name, and I think the training is called Burnout, Understanding and the training's on there. Google my name, Dr. Moriel McDuffy. Google job burnout or job stress, and you will essentially I'll pop up. And when you take the training, I have documentation. I have a burnout plan in there. I also do coaching. So if you email me at usualpolitics@politicsasyusual.com, I do coaching. I can get you that information as well. So I'll help you with the burnout plan, as well as, we can kind of go and go through, and we can meet weekly or bi-weekly and see how it's going with the plan, you know, follow up and I'll help you make adjustments. And that goes into the last question. Do you help with the burnout plan? Absolutely, I coach. So if anybody wants to give me that information, you know, the site usualpolitics.com. But if you look at PAU, contact me at pau@usualpolitics.com. I don't think I said that before, but pau@usualpolitics.com. And I will get back to you and we can talk about coaching. And if you just want to do the coaching, you don't want to do the training, then I can give you the burnout plan that way as well. Let's see. Perhaps set boundaries with the employer. Let me see. Oh, can you type the name? Oh, yeah, where you can find a burnout plan. Okay. So udemy.com, udemy.com. Udemy.com, udemy.com. That is the training. Udemy.com. So if anybody is interested in the training, then definitely check it out. Again, this is Dr. Moriel McDuffy at Politics as Usual at usualpolitics.com, where we look at the politics of life. Thank you for coming, and until next time, people.